Check out the Sustainability Expo Europe October 1st and 2nd in Amsterdam. 500 plus expert speakers. Use a code SESustain20 at checkout. Get 20% off.
Okay.
All right. See the numbers going up. We're recording. It's fantastic. So welcome everybody back to the Sustainiacs. I'm Michael Vincent. I am the Sustainiac every time you see this show. My guest Sustainiac, because she is one in real life too, is, and I got this right the first time, Shila Wattamwar. I kicked it. I really did. And I should spell it out at the bottom and see how many people can get that as well. But welcome to the show, Shila. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's great to be here. Nice speaking to you today, Michael. Yeah,
awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad that you made it. You got a really interesting, your whole career is really interesting to me, and what you're doing in sustainability and that type of thing is tremendous. But you are, let me get this right, a leader in sustainability and strategy and organization integration, which I believe is true. I do not doubt that at all. But you are also VP of Shared Services at Retech Advisors, right?
Right. Yeah. I've been in this world for a long time. So
you've been around the sun a couple times?
I've been around. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this. So, hey, so what are you doing at Retech, Shila? Let's get the lowdown on what you're doing currently, and then let's get into how you got there and what your life mission is, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, what my life mission
is. It is huge. We may not get the whole way through your life mission. I'm not sure, but
I'll start with Retech. How about that?
All right, let's do that.
So Retech is, it's a wonderful organization. We are a portfolio company that is owned by Blackstone under an umbrella called Legence within that Blackstone owns. And what we do is we work with institutional real estate owners, predominantly in the commercial real estate space, but a little bit beyond that as well. And we help them make their sustainability real estate assets more sustainable. So, decarbonization of their real estate assets, greenifying them, helping them comply to various disclosures.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, how did you get involved with there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I got a million questions, right? Because, I mean, when you talk about so is it pre-construction, post-construction, revamping, rebuilding, all that kind of stuff? I know some people on the West Coast who are into the deconstruction of it in a very sustainable way. I don't know if you've heard of Urban Machine or not, but they're pretty cool. So there's we can talk about that when we go through that, because that's a very interesting space. How did you go from being a scholarly Illini all the way to this?
So what Retech, what we deal with there is predominantly already constructed buildings. And so certainly in the realm of sustainability, there's so much that can be done pre and post construction. Yeah. There's some really cool things happening there, especially with regards to kind of some of the raw materials being used, green concrete, mycelium and hemp-based brick. And so, in that pre-space, there's absolutely a lot of innovation happening.
Sure.
And then in the post-space, or current building structures, there's also a lot that can be done. And that's where we're working with the owners to help them become more energy efficient, waste efficient, water efficient, implement things like, roofing, different types of roofing to help that happen and so forth.
So so there's refurb things like alternative energy sources, like solar panels on the roof, that type of stuff.
Yep.
And more efficient utilities within in the building as well. Is that?
That's right. Yeah. So there it's really interesting because right away, not only are you seeing a savings with regards to the footprint and impact, but also an ROI savings, which is a big driver as well.
So do you find, so is that it? I mean, do you see that? There's so many questions to ask. I don't know which ones to start with, but what brings somebody to you and say, hey, look, we need to make our building more green? What's their number one motivation factor that you see now? And has that changed over your time being there from, hey, we have to because the city says to, hey, we want to, or hey, all our employees are going to quit if we don't?
Yeah. That would be great if we got to that point, right? Where it was
right. It's just interesting to me to see what are the pressures that make a company do that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Because
I
that
would.
really kind of tells us where we're at in society on many, many levels, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the three primary drivers that I see, and I will caveat this by saying I've been only with the organization for 4 months, and we can talk about what I did before that for 10 years, but
Yeah, please, we will.
within the
Sure.
space, and I would say in general within kind of the corporate landscape, whether we're talking about real estate or any other sector, the three primary motivations are investor pressure. So you have these large, capital influxes from the institutional investors that are in the amounts of millions and even billions of dollars that are motivating companies to think about their sustainability initiatives because that's what's going to drive the investments. Then there's the regulatory landscape, and that's one that has changed quite a bit over the last 10 or so years that I've been in this space. So we've gone from mandated disclosures, especially in Europe and EMEA, to even the
Yeah.
SEC exploring that on some of the carbon footprinting. And then value creation. So predominantly financial impact. What are some of these factors that are going to, if not paid attention to, going to put our assets into risk or put our businesses into risk of some sort? And that risk can be reputational risk. It can be, just raw materials and savings and efficiencies and so forth. And so just like, again, with the real estate side, as well as most other assets, that value creation is something that is, a big driver as well. So those are kind of the three primary drivers. I would love to get to a point where we're stacking in that fourth driver of just being more eco-friendly and doing what's best for the world. And I think it's there, but it's probably not as apparent, especially in jurisdictions like the US, as it is maybe
Yeah.
in some other places.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because that's what was coming around in my mind as well. I had a person on, and I called it the Heidelberg effect. And this woman, she's a VP of sales at a sustainability a company that makes sustainable, actually, planters. And she got into it because she was living in Heidelberg, Germany, for a number of years. And their circular economy, sustainability, it's just a way of life because
Yeah,
of the resources that they have. And it is very much a culture thing, right?
that's
United
right.
States, we just go dig another hole in the ground in West Texas and throw some garbage in it, I guess, or something, or out in the Midwest is what we do here a
We're
lot.
really a culture of convenience and consumption. That's a big.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a generational thing too. There's so many different things in our society that you just have to wait for the next generation to come through because they're the ones that are being taught it, right? So now you've got my kids are being exposed to this and your kids are being exposed to this. They're going to assume that that's what you do as you get older.
That's exactly right. And they pick it up so easily. Like little example is we moved from paper napkins to cloth napkins. And, it's still quite habitual for my husband and I to get used to. And with the kids, it's like, oh gosh, why aren't we using the cloth napkin? I mean, they think that something's, the ecosystem's broken if we're not using the cloth napkin because they've just become so used to it so quickly.
Yeah, they really do. It's unbelievable. So, okay, so how did you let's go through you getting to, or let's stay on this retech for instance. So you've been there just 4 months, right?
That's right.
But this advisory, how big of a space is it out there in, would you say, globally and within the United States? Is it really kind of a nascent type of thing in the United States? Is it really just kind of standing on its own too? Because that's kind of how I imagine it, as being more mature elsewhere. And you kind of implied that a bit, but I mean, we know that our attention to the environment and circular economies, et cetera, is less mature than it is in other areas of the world. But
Yeah.
how is this space? Are we behind, or are we, catching up, or what does that look like?
I think something you said earlier was very interesting that it's, just a part of how we think. And so I do think that there are quite a few sustainability initiatives happening across industries, even within the commercial real estate industry, that are happening without that label of sustainability attached to it. So for instance, we come back to like the retrofitting that you mentioned and adding in more efficient water systems or better recycling systems. I mean, that has been in place for a very long time because it offers an ROI benefit. It offers that value creation
Yeah.
to the landlords, to the owners. And now, yes, of course, we're bucketing it into a sustainability bucket because it's important to pay attention to. Again, regulators and various frameworks are asking for those disclosures, and so there's a little bit more light being shone on those things, as well as bringing in new things that people should be thinking about.
Yeah, that makes sense because I mean that's one of the things that I've talked about before, and you uncovered it is that sustainability in business is really just good business practice, right? And that's kind of what you're saying is hey, you go through your real estate, your assets, your physical assets there where you do your business, and quite obviously you want it to be as most energy efficient as it possibly can because it saves you cash, right?
It saves you money. It allows you to, increase those prices for the tenants while the tenants still then get a savings downhill. So again, it's a win-win for everyone involved.
It really and everybody who's not involved directly, right?
That's
Because
right.
you're impacting the environment. So yeah, it is absolutely, and that's very interesting to me because you have CEOs and those and CFOs, et cetera, those that are controlling the companies, et cetera, that kind of balk at the sustainability and certainly ESG obviously becomes like this. Don't say ESG; it's not cool anymore. You have to say something else, even though it means the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But it's just not cool anymore. Is they see it as a money drag and a it deters them from their core competencies or their core business, but that's not necessarily true at all, right?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, of course, there are initiatives and there are activities that are more tilted towards societal or environmental benefits. Um, but again, it all kind of comes full circle, I think, especially as a long-term investor or an institutional investor. You're not, you're thinking about, yes, the immediate ROIs and your immediate performance of your portfolio, but you're also thinking about how that's going to look in 25 years. And these things that people care about that are going to affect or benefit society and the environment are going to come back into the equation of financial materiality and materiality to a company as well.
Yeah.
And there's a concept called double materiality that's spoken about a lot in our world. And I think you see this in practice quite a bit more in
I got to write
EMEA.
that down.
Yeah, for me, when I was thinking about this a few years ago, I was like, oh, it all makes sense, right? Because it's considering two separate materialities. One materiality is more on the financial end, and that financial end that affects the organization's bottom line. And the second materiality is the materiality that affects society and environment. And the question as an investor is, how do you balance those two, or where do you tilt towards those two different materialities? Again, I think the institutional market in Europe does a very good job in balancing those two things. And again, recognizing that societal and environmental materiality will eventually manifest in that financial organizational materiality as well.
Yeah.
I think in the US, we're not quite embracing it, at least at the same extent or the same, dollar amounts as in other places.
Yeah. So the balance of the double, is it double materiality or dual? It's
Double
double. Double.
materiality, dual.
Dual, whatever, but double materiality. So the balance there again seems to point towards this where society is, right? The maturity level of the society and how they interact on a normal basis with the environment, right? I mean, you have locations that understand or have grown up with a much stronger relationship with their environment, whether it's through a lack of resources or just a different societal respect for it than the extract, use, toss, and convenience, right?
That's right. And you see that in emerging countries quite a bit, right? So sure, they're
Right.
industrializing, but their day-to-day habits are exactly as you mentioned, because there's just a lack of resources that they're exposed to or a lack of conveniences that they're exposed to. They're just by nature thinking about conservation or reduce, reuse, recycle. I mean,
Yeah, because
it's always that
they
order.
don't just go out and buy a new mop, or they don't just go out and buy a new whatever widget,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's just it's not there. And
Yeah.
also because of the don't you find that you know the polarity due to what people call, and I certainly do as well, is like the global South seems to be more of like the garbage can of the rest of the world. It's where we send our stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think in general, no matter where we are, right, we have to kind of think about um, how some of the environmental impacts interact with the social impacts.
Right,
So if
right,
we
right, right.
are kind of not, if we're looking at solutions, but they're only manifesting in economies that are more wealthy or regions that have economies that are more wealthy,
Yeah,
then, we're increasing the societal divide, right? And that's not good either. So
yeah.
I do think those two concepts always have to be looked at together.
I agree. What I mean by the global South and what we've done and that ability to do that is if national sword, China saying, "Hey, no more crap coming into our country." If that had happened 40 years ago, we'd
Yeah.
be much further down the road, right? We just had the convenience in North America to just say, "Get rid of it."
That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Especially in industries like food and fashion. Gosh, you see the waste and it is
yeah.
incredible.
So let me ask you this: we talked about you talk about the upgrading the utilities, et cetera, that type of thing in the real estate. One thing that I've become aware of over the last since we spoke last is getting involved. My company getting involved in solutions for um, companies, and it's specific to their real estate. And because of the way they were designed to be incredibly efficient and just in time, et cetera, now they don't have the ability to deal with the waste that their operations produce. Okay. So think a Walmart or not a, yeah, think about a Walmart or a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and not to pick on those brands. So let's those big box retailers where the store is the warehouse now.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if the store is the warehouse, they don't have room to collect the waste and deal with it. It has to go right now. And a huge one that I never realized before is the medical industry, hospitals.
Hmm.
The amount of plastics on a daily basis coming out of one, medium-sized hospital is enormous.
I could imagine.
And they don't have that ability to deal with it because of the infrastructure that they're working in. They're not built to have a big dock or any way to deal with that. But they certainly should be now as we move forward, right? Because we're discovering these things. Do you get into any of that type of stuff and how to figure out those type of things for people or advise or anything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, admittedly, I don't know the specifics of, the how the waste removal works within that industry.
Right.
With that said, I mean, that is some of what these frameworks that are out there, or like these investor frameworks that investors are starting to look more closely at, are trying to understand and trying to get to. And so, there, for instance, if the plastic waste is at X amount, I think the goal is to reduce that. And
Sure.
now, I think for step one is just like understanding what your waste is, right? It's really hard to reduce, or it's really hard to mitigate those risks or manage those risks if you don't even know what's happening. And I think I think we're still, many of us are at step one. Many of the industries that are at step one is at least let's collect the data so we know what's happening, and then figure out our plan of action as it relates to minimizing or conserving more, or waste, or collecting waste more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting space that you're in because as you peel back like the first layer of, okay, utilities, you find that there's this world of all this other stuff that needs to be done
Yeah.
behind it. And there's all these different, because you talked about the different types of building materials that go down that happen, and even design, right? There's a firm out in California
That's right.
that designs modular buildings.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because their mission is diametrically opposed to itself. It's they're designing buildings to last forever that can also be deconstructed and used somewhere else, which is
Interesting. Yeah.
which makes no sense, right? But I mean, that's the way they look at different things, because once you have a deconstruction event, um, because you can't call it demolition anymore because you need to deconstruct and reuse. Um, the design, just like in consumer goods packaging,
That's right.
or any of that type of stuff, the end life of it needs to be a consideration,
Yeah.
along with the use of it, and that's becoming more and more evident in the real estate business as well.
I'll say, like, again, across industries or even across habits, the word or the phrase that everybody knows from when you're in kindergarten to our age is reduce, reuse, and recycle.
Yeah,
And, someone pointed this out to me the other day. It truly is in that order, right? We have to reduce that first. That has to be our primary goal, is to reduce our consumption. Then what we are consuming, let's try to reuse as much as possible to extend that end life,
yep,
and then recycle, because we've already taken, the materials that we don't necessarily want to use into the ecosystem, plastics and so forth. So at least let's try to recycle that. But the ideal is to not even get it into the ecosystem. Like, let's try to stay away from some of those plastics. Let's try to use
sure.
some of those alternatives. So that's kind of the last kind of course of action for whatever we have to. Yes, let's recycle those things.
Yeah, and it's important that all three of those are equally important right now.
Yes.
Because I mean, if we stopped using all the plastics right now, we still have so much plastic garbage. We still got to deal with
Oh,
it.
that's exactly right. Yeah. So let's try not to bring more in, but yes, let's try to use what we have and extend that end life as best as possible before it ends up in the landfill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to continue to use what has previously been extracted from the earth. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think I forget who said. I think Tamsin Edifate said that to me, and I was like, "Wow, that's that's an interesting way to look at it." Once it's extracted, let's try and use it as many times as possible before we go extract more from the earth.
Yep, that's right.
Let's extract those things from what we've already done, which is very, very interesting. It really is. So let's get into how you got there. Where do you want to go first? You want to go back to all the way to your dorm room in at Illinois, or as an Illini, or I think it's interesting that you came out and right away went into like Morningstar investment and that type of stuff. But one that really, really impacted me, and I saw in your background as I was stalking you on LinkedIn, is Chefs for Impact.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's a great organization. Well, I'll start a little bit from where I kind of got started, just because I think it's an interesting story of kind of the evolution of financial services.
Yeah.
I graduated, I got my MBA, and I ended up working for a small index company. At the time, it was small. It was called FTSE. It's now quite a large benchmarking organization, part of London Stock Exchange. But at the time, people thought we sold socks because we were called FTSE. And so, during that time, what we did is we worked with, again, the large institutional pension plans that were running running money as part of their constituencies. And they were interested in creating a benchmark or an index that comprised of companies that were invested in or creating water efficiency, energy efficiency, and waste efficiency vehicles. So,
Right.
Their primary line of business was to create those efficiencies in those areas. And, it was pretty interesting. They were putting, what we were working with pension funds that were willing to put billions of dollars in this. And it would kind of sparked a light bulb thinking, I want to learn more about this. People are thinking about it. People are investing in it. And so then fast forward a few years, I had my second son, and I was like, well, I want to go back to work and do something really important, something that they can even come home and speak to them about. And so I got into the sustainability area, but within financial services.
Right.
So again, kind of went in, started working for a nonprofit actually called CDP. That was a short stint, a few months, but then worked with a company called Sustainalytics for almost 10 years. And Sustainalytics, we looked at companies, we evaluated and we did research on about 20,000 companies globally, and we looked at their environmental, social, and governance activities, and we provided, a scoring, a rating, and then we sold that scoring, rating, and data and research to these large pension fund investors or these
Mm.
asset managers, so that they could then take that into consideration as they were evaluating a company. They can bring that right into their investment thesis. And so now all of a sudden, not only were we just, were these companies or were these asset managers looking at their regular accounting principles and the 10Ks and, the regular figures that they would look at, their accounting figures, they were also looking at employee turnover. Do they have a waste management program? Do they have an environmental policy? Do they have governance over these things? And because it manifested as risk and as a bottom line effect if they weren't considering those things.
So and we'll continue on, but I wanted to ask you, what were the risk assessment, or what risks were assessed to those things? Were they at risk of losing business or not gaining business because of the mandates internationally for trade and the demand for, second and third scope impacts, right? Or from, the ability to attract younger talent that's more important in these things, and which impacts your growth and health as a company and retaining employees? Or, can you speak to that? Or was it, is that what they were looking at? Or was there a
Yeah.
mix of that?
All of the above, right? We were looking at what factors across the E and S and G could result to risk to this company. And so
Right.
employee turnover, for example,
Yeah.
like not having a good DE&I initiative or not having, a spectrum of diverse employees can significantly contribute to employee satisfaction and thus turnover, which has an operational effect, right? Or a
Right.
cost effect on the operations. Having a tremendous water efficiency or a water dependency without any efficiencies there can increase your costs if you're an agricultural food company. On and on. If you don't have the right governance, then you're more subject to various bribes, which can result in fines. If there is an issue that manifests, that a big controversy, that can result in reputational issues, which can manifest in costs as well. And so we were looking at the gamut, probably close to 80 factors, per company across
Oh,
that
wow.
ES and G
Yeah.
spectrum. And we like I said, we sold that research to the investors that were going to invest in these companies so they can integrate those thoughts into their investment thesis as well.
That is tremendous. Did it go as far as how into their vendors? Did it at that time, were you going back into the scope 2 and scope 3? I mean, not
Yeah.
just carbon emissions or anything like that, but when you get into manufacturing, especially in textiles, et cetera, you got to know where those carbon or those cotton fibers are coming from, right?
It's great. Yeah, it's a great question. So to some extent, we looked at supplier, characteristics.
Yeah.
Fast forward now 10 years, there are companies that look really deeply into supply chain, supply chain mechanics associated with a company. And so that is one of the maturities of the field, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. So where'd you go from then? Did you go to?
Yeah, so we were then acquired by Morningstar, which is how I
Okay.
ended
So
up.
that's how you got to Morningstar. That was bought by Morningstar. Gotcha.
Yeah. We were called Sustainalytics. We were about 100 people when I joined, maybe
Oh, wow.
150 global, but 150 only. And then we grew to, I think at our highest, maybe 2,500 people, 3,000 people, something like that. So it was a real testament to the market really embracing ES&G factors
Oh,
into their
wow. That's
investment
fantastic.
thesis. So hyper growth became acquired by Morningstar. There was some recalibration, so we weren't quite at 2,500 by the time I left.
Right.
But what that did, that acquisition by Morningstar, is it opened the doors into the retail market as well, and that was
Okay.
really exciting because now we could bring this concept of investing in an ESG or sustainability integrated manner to the retail segment to people like me and you, and getting our financial advisors involved to say, let's invest in alignment with what you value. So, hey, you value, X tobacco. Great. We have a mutual fund for you to be able to do that. You
Hmm.
value, minimizing carbon footprint. Great. We have a ETF or a mutual fund that we can help you do that. And so we were helping create those retail vehicles as well as rating all the other vehicles out there. We not only now then started rating stocks, but also mutual funds. What were their sustainability characteristics as a whole? And again, that started really bringing this to the forefront of people, everyday people.
I got you. So let me ask you this. I just read an article, and it's just relative to your data exercises and your rating and investigating, I guess you could call it. But when you're digging into the companies, how is it now, in your opinion, in carbon credits, that like they find that only like a third of them or less are actually valid? How is that
Yeah.
possible when you have people like, Sustainalytics out there that could quite easily validate these from the very beginning based on the intelligence and talent bandwidth that you guys had and what you guys were doing before?
Yeah. Carbon credits gets a bad rep. And, I don't want to, and
Is it
again,
just because they got too excited and blew them up too fast? Is that what it is?
it
Or
could be, but the truth is, it's a need. I believe it's a need, and I think
I,
maybe
I'm,
this
I'm,
is
I'm, I'm, I totally get the concept, and I believe that
yeah,
it is to be able to invest and to be able to get that investment in those initiatives through the exchange of those carbon credits is tremendous. It's the abuse that needs to.
that's right. It's the tracking, it's the validation. And so while Sustainalytics didn't get into the carbon credit market, there's actually a great organization called B Zero. They're also global spanning that does exactly that. They go ahead and they rate and they validate and they categorize the carbon credit space so that
Yeah,
investors can understand what they're getting into. And of course, that
yeah,
plays, that rating then or those characteristics plays a part in the cost or the premium associated with that
yeah.
investment into the carbon credit. But again, like it is to help identify which ones are actually set up for success.
Yeah. It's also, I think there's also a bit to it that as we learn more and more about the impacts of different types of carbon sequestration or reduction, that some of them are not as quite as impactful as we thought, right?
Yeah.
Or not as positive. And I imagine when you were studying different firms and stuff like that, there was those moments where, wait a minute, this isn't quite as good as we thought it was, or maybe this isn't quite as bad as we thought it was, right? And there's those kind of adjustments that happen because you inevitably you learn more as you study more, right? Can't
That's
help it.
right. And I tend to take a little bit of a forgiving path there because look, I think we spoke about this earlier, Michael. Like I think that we can't let perfection be the enemy of progress, right? So like
Yeah,
if we're going towards the right way and if it's still at a point of imperfection, that's okay. We're at least funding initiatives that can help it on its way to perfection, right? So I think the
absolutely.
example we spoke about was kind of the lithium batteries
Oh yeah,
associated
yeah,
with
exactly. Yeah.
EVs.
And it was a new one I saw. It was Air New Zealand. BBC put out this thing. Air New Zealand drops their 2030 carbon reduction goals. Not even close to the truth. The
Yeah,
headline was such a clickbait lie; it wasn't even funny.
yeah.
What they, I mean, go out and find it, people, because it's ridiculous, and you'll learn why I hate headlines.
Yeah,
Because
you
if you
gotta
read
look
it,
under
or
the
if
hood.
you read it, you'd be like, "What? Why would you ever write that headline other than to try and I don't know." Anyways, let's move on. Let's move on.
Sure.
So, I, so Impact Council, Fast Company, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff like
Yeah.
right
Trust or
now, right?
impact. We
You're
can
doing
come back
one,
to
two,
that.
three. You're in four different things going on right now, right?
Yeah.
you're so. Do you sleep at all, or and you? But let's talk about some of those. Those are fun things. What's
Yeah.
going on?
And that's the thing, they are fun. So,
Yeah.
I always think it's about energy management more than time management. And so they
Yeah. Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
energy,
Yeah.
and I like that. I've been in kind of that institutional space for so long, between Sustainalytics and now retech. And I realized that it's so important to, create momentum in that institutional space, but also equally important is to, you know, align that with everyday people. So like I said, the retail piece excites me so much because now all of a sudden you're bringing a lot of access to these concepts and to these ideas to the retail person, to the everyday person, and helping them think about sustainability and connect to that as well. And ultimately, I actually think that's going to have the most gravitas because it's supply and demand. The more you can get consumers to demand sustainability from companies, the more they're going to supply that. And so it's such an important driver. And so a lot of these organizations I'm part of outside of work really do focus on that, the consumer. Chefs for Impact works with kids. We do fundraising, and we work with folks in the food industry, and we teach kids about sustainable food systems. Impact Council, Fast Company Impact Council allows me a platform to write about sustainability for the everyday person. And I actually have my own website called sustainableme.today that is fully meant to, bring these concepts into the means of what people are thinking about every day, the food they eat, how they dress, the skincare they use, etc. And as part of that, I actually just published a book. And so, there's a lot going on, but it's all meant to kind of foster that consumer space, that everyday person.
That's really awesome. So chefs for impact. Are you teaching kids how to cook sustainably?
Um, I am not. I probably shouldn't be teaching anyone how to
Oh,
cook,
so your
but I
your
sit on the
culinary
board.
degree did not get you that position.
It didn't know. It
Okay,
suffices for my family, but that's about it. No, I sit on the board. I co-chair the board for Chefs for Impact.
I
And yes,
gotcha.
the mission is to work with chefs and restaurants that are, thinking about sustainability. We put on these fantastic events across New York, even a little bit around New York, and all the proceeds that are fundraised go towards teaching kids about sustainable food systems. So how to cook sustainably, how to grow sustainably, what are the merits of doing that, and so forth.
Yeah, sustainable sourcing of food. That's tremendous. Does it because there's a lot of organizations that try to address food deserts, and
Yeah.
some of them actually try and do it in a very sustainable way. There's a guy there in New York who's building biodomes on top of buildings
Oh,
to
wow.
grow
Yeah,
certain crops inside of them sustainably, which is kind of cool. For fresh vegetables and that type of stuff right
that's
there in the
great.
city, et cetera, which is very cool. Um, so uh, your sustainableme.com.
Sustainableme.today, because it's
Oh,
got
dot
to be
today.
today.
Sustainableme.today. Is this like life hacks for sustainability? Is that what this is?
Yeah,
Is this
yeah.
like,
I kind of always think of it in twofold. One is people need to know, so they need the education to connect to it. And I believe that drives action. Now, that's again something I believe and I try to kind of put in practice. So the website and the book are very much based on education followed by action. Let me tell you about something, and then let me give you some ideas or suggestions on how you can do your part
so
to.
what's the book? Do you have a copy of the book there?
I do. Here we go. It's called
Look at
Simply
that.
Sustainable. And
Simply sustainable.
yep,
I love it.
and it is
It looks like
truly,
it's going to have a bunch of pictures in it, does it? Because I only read books with a lot of pictures in
it
it.
does. Here we go. It's very simple. It's 52 facts and 52 actions that you can implement once a week over the course of the year. You'll be a lot more sustainable. And it's
Oh,
really,
okay.
it's like, here, I'll read you one. So speaking of food, the footprint of one
Story time with
hamburger.
Shila Wattamwar.
Yeah.
It's now story.
The footprint of one hamburger is approximately 650 gallons of water compared to the footprint of one bowl of lentils at 57 gallons of water, or one
What?
bowl of salad at 21 gallons of water. So the action there is by no means am I going to tell people to go vegan or look, meat is part of culture. I respect that so much. But the action there is eat at least 3 vegan meals per week. And you can find many delicious recipes on, and I list a couple of websites. So again, obtainable, simple, and hopefully, it's easy for people to follow and not feel overwhelmed by this concept of sustainability.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and what you just said there really it gives people the knowledge to be able to be better and not strive for that perfect, because the perfect doesn't exist.
That's right.
We are not built by the higher being to be perfect, right? We're not.
Yeah.
And so, like we said before, chasing that before we do anything is ridiculous. You'll perfect yourself right into non-existence. But that is tremendous because you're sitting there going, you know what? I think I'll have salad instead today or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Exactly.
that is really cool. I like it. So it's kind of like my daily or weekly calendar type of thing. Oh, it's new week. I get a
Yeah.
Digbert calendar. I can get rid of Digbert and put in Simply Sustainable calendar. That's fantastic. And because I was going to ask you
Good idea.
for a daily hack, and there you have it. You're right there with it.
Yeah, and the nice thing, I designed it to be somewhat of a kitchen table or nightstand or coffee table book so that anyone in the family can kind of pick it up. And like we talked about earlier, once you get these things in front of children, it just becomes their norm. So for me and you and for, folks of our generation, it's always going to be a change. It's going to take effort. It's going to be, something that we have to strive towards. But again, put it in front of our kids and it becomes their norm. And so the next generation it's that much easier. And then hopefully, generations to come, it becomes even easier.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up, and every meal there was some portion of it was meat, and you had milk
Yeah.
every meal. And my kids are just like, no, there's milk. Why would I drink that? you know, Meat. I don't understand why are you eating meat? It's funny how things change, and most of it for the better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really good stuff. I love what you guys are. I love what you're doing. I love in all the things that you're doing, and I hope that it continues. Do you have any words of wisdom you want to send out to anybody, or tell them where to go? Where are people going to get a hold of your book? One,
Yeah.
um, and what's your words of inspiration?
Yeah, so you can get a hold of my book anywhere. So you can go to the website, sustainableme.today, and find the link there. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Target, any of the online retailers. It's on pre-order right now. It officially launches September 3rd.
Nice.
And so, yep, that's available. Words of wisdom, I would just, I would go back to say, don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. So especially as it relates to connecting and embracing a more sustainable lifestyle, it's okay that, you're not doing everything in this sustainable manner. Start somewhere. And I almost guarantee that you'll be inspired to do more and more because it feels good. And, sustainability of our world is also linked with the sustainability of us. And I think that, you feel better, you feel more wellness and more peace when you're kind of being more sustainable towards the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. That was amazing. I like the way you just plucked that right out of there because it was beautiful, and I agree with that 100%. The more you become aware of your surroundings, the more you pay attention to how you interact with them, the better everything is going to be. I mean, once you think about those types of those words of wisdom, they become obvious, right? I mean,
Mhm.
aren't the most insightful words of wisdom like you go, well, duh,
Yeah.
right?
You just kind of need it spelled out or like you need to say it to yourself. but
Well,
they're out there.
you get so focused on what you're trying to do, and like we said before, trying to perfect things, you don't realize that the answers are all right there. They're
Yeah,
really not that hard to find, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Sheila, for being on. People, go to sustainableme.today, get the book, and learn more about Sheila and what she's doing there. I really appreciate it, Sheila. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
Fantastic. Everybody, we'll see you next time on the Sustainiacs. Peace and love.